What's up, everyone? Welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast that takes a trip down Philly sports memory lane and asks the question, what if? I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. You can follow me on Twitter and TikTok at Jimbo_Mont, Instagram at Philly Jimbo. Also, like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. I post videos of this as well as the daily This Day in Philly Sports History. So before I get into anything today, I just want to clarify some of that just because I'm still getting people asking me, and I know it's confusing. The two podcasts obviously are related. Back to the Future is the weekly one where we take a specific event or season or era or whatever and take a deep dive into it and ask the question, what if? What if this happened? What if this went this way? What if this didn't happen? And then I do This Day in Philly Sports History. So I obviously am a former history teacher. So I'm big into history, but especially when it comes to Philly sports, I'm really into diving in and seeing just kind of what happened, understanding maybe what helped shape some of the mindset, some of the things that the fan bases are. And it's just something fun. And for example, today we went back to 1974 and we talked about the Flyers. It was their first or their second. They were defending champions, so they were trying to win their second Stanley Cup. And on this day, they beat the Kansas City Scouts 10-0. And we talked about all the guys that scored and how they used that as a jumping off point for the entire month of December. They just went on a ridiculous run and used that momentum to carry them to their second straight Stanley Cup. And I like to throw in different nuggets. So, like the Kansas City Scouts, they started as the Kansas City Scouts. They moved to Denver to be the Colorado Rockies. Not those Rockies, the hockey Rockies, which I still laugh when I hear that. But you know the Kansas City Scouts today as the New Jersey Devils. So I'm very big on finding out how teams got to where they were because we've been pretty blessed in Philly. With the exception of the Sixers, our teams have been in Philly since the beginning. The Flyers, Phillies, and Eagles. The Sixers came via Syracuse, but we'll get into that a different day. So things like that. So those are the tidbits. Usually it's about a 5 to 10 minute. It's a good listen if you listen to a couple different podcasts and are stuck in traffic or have a longer commute. It's something you can watch on your phone while you're drinking coffee, in the bathroom. I mean, it kind of is what it is. But be sure to like and subscribe to both of them because it does help the algorithm out. And now that I know what that means, it definitely, I've been seeing more and more of my own podcast stuff pop up on my, especially YouTube, like, hey, you might like this. I get notifications. So thank you for those of you who have been liking and subscribing because I'm starting to see it working. I truly appreciate it. We did take off last week for Thanksgiving. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving with family and friends. I know I did. I did 3 straight days. I was ready for like a salad detox from all the turkey and ham and excuse me. At my in-laws, we did have, I guess because they also had back-to-back and my mother-in-law did not want turkey 2 days in a row. And hey, worked for me. We had spaghetti and meatballs. It was the first time I think I've ever had spaghetti and meatballs for Thanksgiving. And let me tell you, it was a good break because I had my family, my in-laws, and then we did a Friendsgiving. So it was nice to have that, and it was good meat. And I could eat spaghetti and meatballs any day anyway. So just a little side note on that. It's been an interesting couple weeks here in Philly sports since the last time we talked. The Eagles are 10-1, which is good. They have a huge game on Sunday, and I'm excited not only because I'm going down to the game, but I think what it's going to do, it's going to test them on both sides of the ball. On defense, obviously trying to stop their entire running game. Derrick Henry is just an absolute beast. And I think it's going to be a good test because going back, they did a nice job the other day against, for the most part, against Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. They did a good job the week before against Jonathan Taylor. But Washington was able to run all over them. So hopefully they can continue. And this is a whole different beast. No pun intended there. But I think they're a physical team, and it's going to challenge our defense. And I'm really excited to see how they respond to that, because this is the type of game you're going to have to win, especially on a cold day in the playoffs, whether or not you have home field or not. For the most part, the teams right now that are vying for some of those spots, with the exception of San Francisco, but it can get pretty nasty and rainy and windy in San Francisco in January. So I'm anxious to see how they do it. And then offensively, I think this is probably going to be the most physical defense they've played all year. So I want to see the line come out. Like, we obviously have that good running game, the good offensive line. I want to see what they do. So just overall excited. Hopefully special teams gets their heads out of their asses and can do something. Not holding my breath on that one, but hopefully the other two sides of the ball are able to kind of keep it together for them. Sixers have been holding their heads above water, making a wave when they can. Good times for those of you who are 70s and 80s TV heads. But help is on the way. Harden is coming back. Joel has been playing pretty decent since he came back. Last night was just a shitty game all around. I talked a little bit about that this morning anyway. But Harden's coming back. I'm looking to see Doc continue to rotate some of those bench guys like Shake Milton in. Give him the playing time, because look what he does when he gets playing time. He has been a solid guy with Harden and Maxey out. So I want to see that. Like, use what you have. Rest these guys. Rest Harden when you can. Rest Joel when you can. Like, let these guys, these bench guys who are on the bench, who everybody says we don't have a good bench, but I mean, they've been doing their jobs. And I mean, granted, that bench is not going to go and make a run at the title, but let's keep it going, Doc. I'm watching you. Get your head out of your ass and start the rotations and everything. Flyers have slowly started to come back to earth, and that's kind of where we're going to pick up today. I was at a party at a friend's house a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to a guy who is a huge Flyers fan. I want to say he's a season ticket holder, but either way, follows the Flyers religiously, and I admittedly am not super on top of things of the four major sports. They're fourth on my list as far as my knowledge and things like that. So I was just kind of picking his brain so I can come on here at both podcasts really and talk to you guys and know what I'm talking about. So I did the Flyers preview and it was going over with him, and he said I was pretty spot on. And he said the difference is he doesn't want them to make a playoff run, because as the team's made up, they're not going anywhere. And they have some pieces, specifically Carter Hart. And this is a very deep and good draft class, and it's very top heavy. So what he wants is to see the Carter Hart to play well, have the goals against and like a shot percentage and things like that. But he doesn't want them to win. They need to figure out a way to get one of the top 3 picks, if not the top pick. And he also said that because they came out gangbusters, that's to be expected because they're a young team, they have a new coach, and a lot of the teams that they were playing, so like your Pittsburghs, your Tampa Bays, Carolina, the teams that are in the playoffs, the Rangers, the Islanders, they sort of chill through training camp because they're trying to rest. Where the Flyers ended the end of the season, they had almost a month and a half, 2 months extra rest than compared to the other teams. So what they want is they want to impress the coach. So they come out and kind of catch some of these teams sleeping. Once those teams get their legs under them and everything, he said you're going to see the Flyers start to fall back. And sure enough, here we are. They just ended a 10-game winless streak. So currently they are 26th in the league, which would be good enough for the 7th pick, which isn't good. And based on that whole 10-game winless streak and everything, I've said a lot, especially on this day in Philly sports history, where I'm like encouraging them to lose. We want them to lose. We want them to tank, basically, because we want one of those higher picks. We want Carter Hart to play well. We want to see what guys we can keep around and things like that. And I've actually caught a lot of slack for it. I had a couple people on Twitter reach out and say, tanking is horrible. I can't believe you would advocate for that. I had somebody on TikTok say the same thing. So that's really where we're going to start today is we're going to just discuss the whole art, I guess you could call it, of tanking and whether or not teams should do it, whether more teams do it than what we're aware of, and things like that. Because if you look at the Flyers, they're technically in a rebuild, but I would even say they are because a lot of these guys probably aren't going to be here in a year or two. They're not guys that you're going to build your team around. So I would even say they're at a level below a rebuild. The Phillies this year were kind of in like almost a rebuild mode the past 2 years, and I think they accelerated that a little bit. I don't see the Flyers making a Stanley Cup run next year. That's why I say I think they're a level below a rebuild. And this is the year, if you're going to be a shitty team and tank, this is the year to do it because the first 3 picks especially are franchise-changing players. The rest of the first round is solid, but I mean, if you really are basically you have a goaltender, which is something that's been haunting the Flyers for years since Pelle Lindbergh died. And I'll give one more plug to this day in Philly sports history. We talked about Pelle Lindbergh a couple times and just how the Flyers goaltending situation has never been the same. And Carter Hart kind of fits that bill. So you have the goaltender, you need one of those solid young players to build around. So if they can get one of those 3 picks, that is where we are. And like I said, I called a ton of flack for saying that. But what is tanking? And basically on Wikipedia, it was the practice of intentionally fielding a non-competitive team to take advantage of league rules that benefit losing teams. Nowhere in there does it say anything about cheating or being against the rules. It's just basically you're taking advantage of the rules. So as far as I'm concerned, the rules are the rules. Major League Baseball, NBA, the NHL, they all have a lottery system. And a lot of it was put into place to prevent teams from tanking, but it's still somewhat of an incentive to lose. I mean, for the most part, you don't see too often in any of the sports. Now, it does happen, so don't send me messages like, oh, well, this team in this year. No, I get it. It happens. But for the most part, you don't see a team that was in the top 3 falling much below one of those top 3 picks. Yeah, somebody will come in every now and then and get the first pick, but you're not going to see the first team, which they at this point they've changed the rules so many times. I don't even know if it's even possible anymore. But like you're not going to see the team that had the most chances to win the NBA lottery. You're not going to see them pick 5th or 6th. Very, very rarely. So there's still an incentive to get one of those top 3 picks. So quickly, I'm not going to bore you with the rules, but in the NBA, top 4 picks are chosen now by lottery. Then it's reverse order of your finish. In the NHL, kind of the same thing, except for they only pick for the first 2 picks. And the one thing I kind of do like to keep it even competitive, which plays right into the Flyers' hand, only one of the top 11 teams can get the first or second pick. So that means if you're the 12th team, you can't move up to the number 1 pick. Or if you're the 16th team, the last team out of the playoffs, you can't come up and get the number 1 pick, which I think that kind of still rewards a team like the Flyers to tank. And I don't see a problem with that. They also make it that you can't move up twice in 5 years. So even if they're trying to keep a competitive balance, which is fine, but like I said, it's still the incentive is there. Major League Baseball recently instituted a lottery system where the top 6 picks are based on like a weighted lottery. They've also thrown in, if you're revenue sharing, you can't be in the lottery more than 2 years in a row. Basically, they're trying to make it so teams just don't keep being bad. And I know baseball is a whole different ball game than the rest of them. And also, if you're a team paying into revenue sharing, so if you go over the luxury tax or you're giving a team money, you can't be selected in the top for consecutive years because chances are you're like the Phillies or the Yankees, teams that have money that are willing to spend that typically are better teams. The NFL still does it the old school way, which I absolutely love. I really do. They do in the reverse order of finish. So if you have the worst record in the league, you get the first pick. Simple as that. You win the Super Bowl, you get the last pick in the first round. I do now in the NFL, it's also different because there's a lot of draft pick trading and things like that. However, all of that, like they've made these rules to stop teams from tanking. However, there's still an incentive to do it. It runs rampant. I mean, like you can see when teams are doing it. Look at in Major League Baseball when teams are selling their players and looking for prospects. Nobody says shit about that. That's tanking. I mean, tell me that's not tanking. And it's like, oh, well, we're planning for the future. Why is it okay for the Chicago Cubs to get rid of their best player at the trade deadline for a bunch of maybe players, but then you're going to give the Sixers shit for the process that they've done? It's the same thing. Teams do it, and it's the only way sometimes to get better. And the NBA, the lottery system was implemented because in 1984, the Houston Rockets were allegedly purposely losing because they wanted to get the worst pick, which this is weird. They ended up tied. I forget who they were tied with. Basically, it was a coin flip. They won the coin flip, and they got Hakeem Olajuwon, which I think worked out pretty well for Houston. And isn't that the point of tanking? To be a competitive team and ultimately win a championship? I don't know. But you have your people still that will make the argument like, oh, well, tank it, you shouldn't tank. And usually it comes, there's like four main arguments. The biggest one I hear all the time is, well, it's unfair to fans. I pay for the team to see. Well, yeah, guess what? You're paying to see the full teams play, and you expect to see a quality product. Well, the purpose the purpose of pro sports is to be entertained. And are you not entertained? And this and that. Well, guess what? What's the difference between tanking and a team in the NBA on load management? I buy tickets to see the Golden State Warriors and Steph Curry and, well, he's not on the team anymore, but like, or I was suspended or whatever, but Draymond and Klay Thompson. Those guys decide to not even make the trip because they have a back-to-back coming up out west against two Western Conference playoff teams. Is that fair to fans? No, it's just what you do. The ultimate goal is to win a championship. And I'm not sure about anybody else out there listening, but I'm way more entertained. I'm way more excited to see my team play when they're good and in contention to win a title than when they're not. If that means sitting through a few years of shitty teams and seeing Joe Smith and Joe Blow and Curtis Blow running the point for the Sixers, but it means they're going to be competitive in a couple of years and ultimately be in the championship conversation, I'm going to take it. Those are the breaks. All right, enough with the Curtis Blow puns. I apologize for that. That was horrible. But when your team is just good enough to be in the playoff hunt, but not quite good enough to be in the lottery or the high in the draft pick, to me, that's what's unfair. It's not entertaining. Like, for the most part, the Eagles over the past 5 years have been fun. Yes, they were in the Super Bowl. They won. They took a couple steps back, reloaded, and now they're back. And that's fun. The whole process Sixers, since Sam Hinkie's been there. Like, he's the only man I know that has been able to make guys that you would never even probably have on your team entertaining to watch, and a couple of them have ended up getting decent contracts about it. The Phillies were fun this year. Why? Because they were good. They went to the World Series. It was entertaining to watch, and that to me is fair. My team was good. I've sat through enough shitty years of the Phillies, so you know what? That's fair. And you take the good with the bad. Like, and if you don't like it, don't pay your money for it or don't go. Like, that's frustrating. Like, I hate that argument because what if they decide, like, I had a Sunday package for years for the Phillies. Sunday happened to be the day they would give. Chooch took his days off sometimes on Sunday, depending on who was pitching. You'd have the third to last and the second to last guys off the bench playing the outfield those days. Was that fair to me? I paid full price for those tickets. I'm not seeing the full team. We're going to give Ryan Howard a day off today. Sorry. Is that fair? What if you go down to a Phillies game and see a bullpen game? Or what if somebody's a little tweaked up at an Eagles game and like Miles Sanders tweaked his ankle and is not playing because you want to rest him because it's not an important game? Is that fair? I don't know. If it means the Eagles are going to win the next week in a better against a better team that's going to have a more meaning in the standings, throw fair out the window. Now, the other argument, speaking along the same lines of fair, is, well, it hurts playoff seeding sometimes. So if two teams are tied for a playoff spot or for seeding or whatever, and one is playing a team that's tanking and the other team is playing a team that's trying to win, how is that fair? It's going to mess up the playoffs. Maybe this team should have been better. And you know what? Here's my response to that. That's such a loser mindset. If you had taken care of your business in any one of your other games, you wouldn't have to rely on anybody else. There's a reason why they say, oh, this team is in control of its destiny. They control their own destiny when it comes to that. That's because you just keep winning. It doesn't matter what everybody else does. So that's just like a loser mindset. And I've talked a lot on, and I know I said I wasn't going to do this again, but during that Phillies run on this day in Philly sports history, and I think I talked about it on here, I want this to be new Philly. Like, stop with this loser mindset. Like, if you're doing what you need to do as a team, it shouldn't matter what anybody else does. So don't come at me like, well, that's not fair. And again, it happens all the time. If the Phillies and the Mets are battling for the division, we know the Mets are going to choke, but hypothetically, if the Phillies and the Mets are battling for the division and they're tied going into the final game of the season, Phillies are playing the Braves, who are still alive for the wild card. The Mets are playing the Marlins or the Nationals. And neither one of the Marlins or the Nationals are tanking necessarily, but they're not playing for anything. They're looking for their next tee time. They're looking for what they're going to do on their vacation. Is that fair? Is that messing up the seeding? Like, should the Marlins be allowed to trade players from the Yankees for the day just to make sure it's fair for the Phillies? No. That's what happens. To me, if the Phillies had played better in one game throughout the rest of the regular season, it wouldn't have mattered. So, like, is it fair? It's the same thing. Stop with the nonsense. Stop with the loser mentality. Take care of your business on the field, and it doesn't matter what anybody else does. Well, tanking creates a losing culture. Tanking creates this whole negativity, and it breeds, and losing is contagious. And yes, I agree, losing is contagious. I agree that negativity breeds. When you're around somebody who's negative, you tend to be negative. And there's a ton of times where you losing the snowball. We talked on here before last time about the 94 Eagles, where it just snowballed out of control for them. And guess what? No free agents are going to want to come here either. And like, for that argument, players want to win. And I agree that if your team is tanking and you're losing all the time, nobody's going to want to come there. But guess what? If a player is that good and you're trying to tank, why do you want them there anyway? You want them 2 years from now when things start to get better. Players want to win. The only way you're going to win is to have good players. But if you're tanking to get those good players, you have to have those young guys that people want to come to play with. You want to have guys like J.J. Redick wanting to come and play with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons back when he actually had potential. You want that. But the only way you're going to do that is to have Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons on your team. You get the good young players, the savvy veterans who are good, who want to win, they will come. Most of those guys that are losing and where that negativity is breeding, guess what? You're not going to win a Super Bowl or NBA title or Stanley Cup or a World Series with them anyway. So who cares if they have a losing mindset? Half of them are there just to collect a paycheck. And if you go back to when the Sixers did it, half of them shouldn't even have been in the NBA anyway. They were D-League players, guys you call up on a 10-day contract at best. So stop it. Miss me with that nonsense. And the last one, it really cracks me up, are the ones that say it's disrespectful to the game It messes with the integrity. The perfect example is when the Eagles, I don't know if they tanked or not, but when they pulled Wentz and put Jalen Hurts in, or I forget what actually happened in that game. Or I guess they put the third string quarterback in, and Washington basically won the division in 2020 by tanking. And you had the people saying, "Oh man, that's not fair. The Giants really deserve it. They went out and won." Well, guess what? Sports are a business. Newsflash, if you didn't know that, it's all about the money. 99% of this world, it's all about the money. And the better the team you have is, the more money you're going to make. And if tanking is going to make me more money and my team better, which in turn, like I said, is going to make more money, then sign me up. And also with that argument, I don't know if anybody remembers, the Giants were 6-10. They were deserving of nothing. Nothing. Washington didn't even deserve. Nobody from the NFC East that year deserved to make the playoffs anyway. So Giants fans, you're still butthurt about it because I see you now and you're like, now that you have a little bit of a winning record or whatever, stop it. You were 6-10. 6-10. Losers. You deserve nothing. And truthfully, the people complain about the integrity of the game, or it messes with, it's disrespectful and it's not the way it was meant to be played. They're probably the same ones that, or actually, I shouldn't even say that. Anybody who complains about tanking are probably the same people who complain about the designated hitter in the National League, or the lack of violence today in football and hockey. These players are soft. The fact the NBA was better in the 80s than what it is today. Today's music sucks, and kids these days. Those are the people that complain about tanking. But in all seriousness, the only logical argument that I see, that I have to avoid tanking, is that you need a superstar player. So you need that one star. And then you can kind of build around it. Set up a big 2 or big 3 if it's the NBA. Or you have your franchise quarterback. Now start bringing in some young talent and maybe mix in a free agent. For baseball, either get a good lineup and then get a free agent pitcher, or have your young pitchers in place and then start filling in some of the spots behind it. I think that's what you need in any of the sports to be competitive. You need to have one superstar player, and then maybe you can talk about avoiding tanking and going out and getting free agency. Kind of like how the Sixers now, they went out, they have Harden. Maxey stepped up as that third player. If they get healthy, they could and should be good. But even if you have to shed some salaries here and there, it might take you a year or two to tank to get better, even with a superstar. But you have to keep your eye on the prize. Your ultimate goal is to put your team in position to win a championship. And sometimes if that means taking a step back and losing, that's what you got to do. And since this is Back to the Future and we always talk about what ifs, I mean, we're talking about tanking. There's only one way we can go with this. What if there was no process? This is ultimately what started and brought tanking to the forefront of everyone's mindset. I mean, you had it before, but this really put it out there. And post Larry Brown, when I forget whether they fired him or he quit. I think knowing Larry Brown, he probably quit. But 2003-2004 season to the last season BH, which is before Sam Hinkie, 2012-2013. Let me tell you a little bit about how your Sixers were doing in trying to build and get back to where they were. They made the playoffs 4 times in 10 seasons. 40%. I mean, if they were a third baseman, they'd be the best player ever. But they were a basketball team. 40% is not good. Of those 4 times, they made it out of the first round once. And I'm going to put an asterisk next to that once because they were the 8th seed and they went to the next round. They did take Boston, who was the 4th seed, to 7 games in the Eastern Conference semifinals. But the only reason they made it out of the first round was because Derrick Rose blew out his knee. There's no way they were losing or beating the Bulls with a healthy Derrick Rose. So I don't know if it's a legitimate made it out of the first round. But hey, we'll give it to them. But either way, they were right on that cusp a lot of times where they were 7-8 seed, or they were the next 2 or 3 teams in the NBA lottery. They did get lucky in 2010. And unfortunately, of all years for them to get lucky and get the second pick, they took Evan Turner. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, they could have taken Paul George or DeMarcus Cousins. However, we will talk about Evan Turner at one point on the what ifs. But for the most part, I mean, consensus was Evan Turner was that guy. So it was what it was. They took the best player on the board, and it didn't really work out for them. But for the most part, other than 2010, their picks were between 9 and 17. You're not going to change anything, and we saw that. They spent 10 years floundering, but Sam Hinkie came in. And I will say they did have some guys that were solid who contributed elsewhere. They had Andre Iguodala, Lou Williams was a draft pick, Thaddeus Young, Vucevic, Drew Holiday. Some of these guys are still playing, and they were solid guys, role players who went on to have success other places. Drew Holiday is still, he ended up winning a title in Milwaukee. He's not the guy you're building that team around, though. That's Giannis. Giannis is the guy you build that team around, not Drew Holiday. But the Sixers basically had a team of Drew Holidays for those 10 years. They were never going to be better than what they were. They were in NBA purgatory. They were going nowhere. And that's why you had Sam Hinkie come in, and he caught a lot of shit for what he did. He basically was able to turn them around through stockpiling draft picks. And honestly, he could have been better with some of the picks he made. Now, I'll give you that. But for the most part, look at where we are now. We have a competitive team, and it's sort of where it's fun to watch them. And there have been some examples of teams tanking that were successful, and it worked out. We talked about the 84 Rockets. The 97 Spurs tanked. They got Tim Duncan. That worked out tremendously for them. They held out David Robinson when he was injured that year a couple times once they realized that he was getting a little bit, they were getting close where they could actually possibly get the top pick. Worked out well for them. The Cavaliers in 2003, we know how that worked out. They got LeBron. Now, allegedly, it could have been fixed, but either way, it worked out well for them. The Astros, who just beat the Phillies in the World Series, from 2011 to 2013, they won 100 games every year. They were horrible. And, I mean, they took some hits on TV money and things like that. Now they've won. They may have cheated for one, but they've won a couple World Series in the past couple years. Excuse me, I apologize. Everybody's been sick in my house, and I've been trying. The 83-84 Penguins tanked, and they were able to get Lemieux. The point I'm trying to make is you have to be bad in order to get good, especially in the world of the salary cap in which we live in. And like I said, I started to get into it, but look at the Sixers. All of a sudden, they were horrible. They were going nowhere, and now they got lucky. And for every Joel Embiid, they had enough. They got lucky, but look, now you have your guy you're building around. You have free agents that want to come in. You have guys that want to play with him. Harden wanted to play with him. You had JJ Redick wanting to come in. So much for the losing culture. Listen, trust the process. And even if the Sixers do not win a title, they've changed the complexity of that team. They were getting those mid-level exception players that were just looking to get paid. They weren't trying to win. They were stuck in purgatory. Now, hopefully they turned it around. So trust the process, like I said. But as much as we're going to trust the process, this is the make or break year for the Sixers and the whole Sam Hinkie and tanking. They're close to being back into that purgatory and being relegated again. So we got to see what happens. This year, if they win it, great. It worked out well. If not, I think they need to make some moves and start stockpiling some draft picks and get some unprotected picks from some of those bottom feeding teams and unload some salaries and things like that. Pull their Howie Roseman, get their Howie Roseman on and try to do it. But either way, for all that's been said, the past 4 to 5 years of watching the Sixers, it's been a lot of fun. I've been entertained. And isn't that what sports is about anyway? Again, tank me up, baby. But be sure to like both of these podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. Check out the YouTube channel. Follow me on social media and everything. Thank you so much for listening. Tell me what you think. Am I crazy? I'm sure there's some of you out there who are cringing and probably have already shut this off because tanking is so bad. And I'm sure you hate today's music too. But just kidding. I'm kidding. But in all seriousness, tell me what you think. Is tanking good? Is tanking bad? And if you think if tanking is bad, how can teams get better then? How do you go from being in purgatory to being one of the contenders? So let me know what you think. Have yourselves a good week. Go Birds. And until next time, I will see you when I see you.